Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Oliver Chang. I am Associate Professor of History and Asian American Studies here at the University of Connecticut. I am so proud to partner with these organizations here today to bring the Fudeko Project to life. Um, let's see, I am also director of the Asian and Asian American Studies Institute at UConn. And this is a space that we have been, so the Institute started in 1993 and has been focused on anti-racism and education and research. And for, since 1993, the university has been honoring the Day of Remembrance event, and we're really excited to bring the Fudeko Project to this long-standing series here at the university. This is the institute is also a space that holds the curriculum lab, which is public-facing, education-oriented work that advocates for the inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islander studies in K through 12 education. So we've been very successful in having new curriculum laws passed here in the state of Connecticut. And now we're working to help the state and school districts and teachers integrate the curriculum into their classrooms. So one of those things has been a Spotify oral history project working with South Asian American youth in Greenwich and southeastern Connecticut. And I believe Hana will share a link from that. And then the other is that we, in passing new laws to bring in Asian American and Pacific Islander studies into the public school curriculum, we now have the capacity to 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 link projects to schools. And these standards, these new social studies standards that you see here, are are um, are the new baseline by which teachers and districts will be teaching about local communities. And so I'm very excited about the prospect of Fudeko Project contributing to a broader conversation in addition to providing that opportunity to have much needed conversations within the community, right? So as you can see, some of these new course descriptions for social studies in elementary school provide us with a really interesting way to teach to the social studies standards using Asian American history, right? So, and we know that because of the racialization of Asian Americans and their historical experiences, that we cannot simply just go to archives, that we have to be in community with folks. And so that's why I'm just so thrilled about this project. And I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us. I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we'll have.
Sorry, guys. I am having a bit of trouble with the sharing my screen part of things, but I think I'm figuring it out. So I'm Hana Maruyama. I'm the co-director of the Fudeko Project, along with Tom Scheinfeldt. I'm also an assistant professor at UConn in history and Asian American studies. I do research on Japanese American incarceration and its intersections with American Indian dispossession. But I'm also a passionate public historian. I got my start at Heart Mountain Interpretive Center and also at the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center. I was also formerly the co-host of Kampu. So this project is very near and dear to my heart, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But I do want to, just before we get too far along, let the rest of our team introduce themselves as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom Scheinfeldt right now.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm Tom Scheinfeldt. Hana was very generous in calling me a co-director of the project. Really, I'm just thrilled to be here to support the project in any way that I can. I'm an associate professor of, I'm a professor of digital humanities at UConn. And director of Greenhouse Studios. And Greenhouse Studios is a digital humanities center at the University of Connecticut. We try to bring arts, humanities, and technology together to build projects of social importance. And this is certainly one of those. I'll let my colleagues at Greenhouse Studios introduce themselves, but I'll just say that in terms of my own background, I've been working on collecting personal narratives and historical documents via the internet for ridiculously now almost 25 years. I've worked on projects like the September 11th Digital Archive, the Bracero History Project, documenting the histories of Mexican guest laborers in the middle part of the 20th century, the Hurricane Digital Memory Bank, working with survivors of Hurricane Katrina in the Gulf, and a variety of other projects, including Omeka, which is a technology suite to enable online collecting that came out of some of that work. So I am, as I said, just honored to be part of this project and excited to follow Hana's lead and work with all of you to do my small part to help document this important history. And Hana, I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Tom Lee, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I'm Tom Lee. I'm a technology strategist at Greenhouse Studios, which means I just deal with technology stuff on our projects and find new technical approaches for making digital scholarship. And I'm just I'm a developer on the Fudeko project, and I just think it's a really cool project, and it's very important, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I'll turn it over to Brooke.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Gemmell. I am the design strategist at Greenhouse Studios. At this point, I've done far less than Tom Lee on this, but mainly I'll be consulting on design, web, and outreach related parts of this project. One thing that I get to do a lot of is work with our super talented students, and one of which happens to be here. Her name is Zoe Ori, and you've already seen her work, but I think we're going to look at it a little bit more as time goes on. Thank you.
So yeah, the Fudeko Project, for those of you who are less familiar with it, is a digital journaling project. It's primarily geared at Japanese American former incarcerees, but we're really hoping to be able to expand it in the near future. What I would personally love is to have a program that's specifically designed for Japanese Latin American former incarcerees, as well as for descendants. So I would love to have a program that's really meant for Sansei and talking about their experiences growing up, in the wake of the camps. This project is, I think I've kind of been working on this project my entire life. I started it I started talking about it with Tom like a couple of years ago, and he was immediately like, yes, we need this project, which I really appreciated, because at that point I was like a brand new assistant professor and was very insecure about all of this stuff. But actually, one of the things that has really come up over the course of this project is that some of the other models that are the most similar to it have really struggled with getting the design up and running. And one of those is actually at UConn. So It's the Pandemic Journaling Project, or PJP, which I encourage you to look up. And they had a ton of participants, but they basically, according to their PI, ran it out of Qualtrics, which I don't know if any of you have used Qualtrics surveys on the back end. It scares me. I'm not going to lie. She said that, and I was like, that's not going to work for us. So that's where that conversation with Tom comes in. And she did very much discourage me from going in that direction, actually. She said they were running something like 150 Qualtrics surveys at the same time. But for me, I think this project is so important because my grandmother just really never got to the point where she was comfortable talking about her incarceration. And I wish I had come up with this idea a few years ago when she was still alive. But to me, part of the importance of the project is that there are others who can still really benefit from it. And it's been so amazing getting our first response that came in last week. It was really exciting for me. So seeing it kind of come to fruition has been really the best part. But I think sometimes people get a little bit intimidated by telling their stories. And part of what we want to really encourage people to understand is that this should be so easy. It should feel like something that you can do in 30 minutes or less. It can be as little time as you want. And we're trying to make it as unintimidating as possible. So one of the things that I asked our team members to do in an effort to let you get to know them and also to show you how the model works is to pick one of our prompts and answer it for us and tell us a little bit about how they picked that prompt. So I'm going to show you the prompt that they chose, and then we're going to hear from each of them, and I'll wrap things up too. So yeah, without further ado, let's turn it over to Jason.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to meet the whole team working behind the scenes to make this so awesome. So thank you again for everyone's work on this. I chose this question: how did your parents meet? Because it helps to explain kind of a bit about myself, and it's also a really wild story. So my parents met in Hawaii. My dad's side is third generation Chinese American in Hawaii, and my mom's side is Irish and Jewish, third generation in that settled in central Minnesota in Anoka. And so how did my mom get to Hawaii is an interesting question, because as it turned out, there was a gas station in Anoka, Minnesota that was celebrating the Hawaii's statehood, and had a competition to see who was the 500th customer at the gas station. And it turned out that my grandma and my mom were the 500th customer, and they won this competition that gave them a all expenses paid trip to Hawaii. And so my mom went on this trip, fell in love with Hawaii, and then finished college and left with $20 in her pocket, got to Hawaii, and got her first job at Liberty Mills department store in Ala Moana, and met my dad, who was working in linens. And so it was because of Hawaii's statehood and the U.S. project of making Hawaii known to the interior of the United States that my mom made her way to Hawaii and met my dad. And then my dad couldn't wait to get off the island and move to Indiana, and that's where I'm from. So that really, does help to explain a little bit about me and why I grew up in Indiana and summers in Hawaii. But I always describe home as wherever the most people meet you at the airport. And for me, that's always been Hawaii. So this is a great question that also ends up being asked a lot in the oral history projects that we do. And it is such a great story that helps to connect generations. And I'm really, proud to share it with y'all here.
I guess I'm up next. So I'll tell a little story about when I was part of a team, and it's more of a professional story, but I came out of grad school. Actually, I was still finishing up my dissertation. My wife followed me to graduate school, and while worked and helped support us while I was in graduate school, and then I promised to do the same for her when she went off to law school. So we moved to Washington D.C. to go to for her to go to law school, and I was writing my dissertation and finishing that up, and trying to find a job to make some money to help support her. I did a bunch of barista type jobs, but then I saw an ad for a job at the Center for History and New Media at George Mason University, and this was a job helping out with the September 11th digital history, September 11th digital archive that I mentioned earlier, and I had been planning more or less to go, become a sort of standard history professor and write books and stuff. But I took this job just, partly it sounded interesting, but partly to help pay the bills. And I ended up on a team with a range of people with very different kind of expertise and experience, people with technology skills, people with oral history skills, people with graduate students, postdocs, senior faculty members, a whole variety of different kinds of people. And it really was a big collaborative effort among a couple of different universities. And that experience of being on a team and doing collaborative work in the field of history really changed the trajectory of my career. I have never really looked back from that. All of the work I've done as a professional historian since then has been collaborative work. I haven't published any single authored books or single authored articles. I haven't done any projects where I'm the only or even the primary person on them. And so when Hana came to me with her idea for this project, I jumped at it because it seemed like the same kind of opportunity to work with new people, with different backgrounds, with communities, which is always a joy. It's that kind of work that really excites me, and so I'm thrilled to be on this project and have the opportunity to work with all of you and meet all of you and embark on another collaborative adventure. So that's my story about when I was part of a team.
Perfect. I was just writing my response into the chat, and it's very related to this. This is making me realize I don't think I've ever not been on a team since maybe I was 7 or 8 years old. And this totally relates to me wanting to talk about a coach who impacted me, who also happens to be my aunt. I've been an equestrian since I was about 7. So I've been coached by my aunt in some way for 20 years, over 20 years, but that's okay. And really I've gone through so much of life having her being a mentor that she's really shaped who I am in so many ways. She's taught me so much about being kind and patient with yourself and others, about compassion for animals, about perseverance, like literally literally getting up and when you fall, brushing the dirt off and just trying again. And she's also just taught me a lot about just caring for others. And I like to think I'm a better parent for that. The horses always get taken care of before you do. And I think that's just something that I've taken into my adult life. And it's just been so cool now as a parent myself to bring my son to the barn, and he learns from her as well. And it's just so full circle to kind of see those things hopefully happening for him too.
My turn. Cool. I think anyone who knows me knows I'm crazy about food, and I'll talk about food all day, all the time. So that's why I chose this question. And my answer is that when I was growing up, my dad always used to cook this thing that we called fried chicken. We just called it fried chicken, although later I found out that it was actually karage, like Japanese style fried chicken, which I only realized like, much later when I went to sort of stay there at in Japan at a language school for a couple months on my own, and like did my own shopping and everything. Because anytime that we would visit, like he would take care of all that stuff. Since I never really learned that much Japanese until then. So yeah, oh, I think I also had a note that like we would eat this with we would just eat this with like just plain rice. And then I remember like as a kid being too fussy to eat plain rice. I think my parents would also like sprinkle this salmon furikake on top. So I must have really liked salty things as a kid.
Hi. So yeah, sorry about the ordering issues. So yeah, one thing that I found interesting about reading Tom's response yesterday, and this really does, I think, speak to how we get to know each other through our stories, was we've been working together for probably over a year now, on and off, and also just learned yesterday that he's Japanese American. So especially fitting to also be helping out with this project, which is exciting. So the story about like how I started school is a little bit unusual because I started out in my local school, but my parents had actually applied to get me into a French immersion program. And it was mostly because of my mom, who is not French at all, but had learned French and had spoken it when she was doing the Peace Corps in Niger. And she applied with her friend, who is the mom of my best friend, Eleanor, and we are both half Asian. So Eleanor is half Chinese, half German, and I'm half Japanese, half like English, Irish, Scottish, like every other like waspy thing that you can find. But basically, they told us that we couldn't join the French immersion program because we were too important diversifying our local school. So it was this really weird moment in the Montgomery County public school system where that was kind of their diversity policy, I guess, was to prevent kids from like leaving a school if they were diversifying their local school. But my friend's mom, Eleanor's mom, was like, well, okay, so we listed her as Asian, but let's just list her as white instead, because, if she's Asian, she is equally white. And surprisingly, the Montgomery County Public Schools did not go for that. They thought that they were like, you can't just change a person's race. And so they turned that down. And my dad had some sort of a friend at the Washington Post, and he took the story to the Washington Post, which I don't think that the school district was expecting. But so my main recollection of this, because I was 5 years old at the time, is that the Washington Post photographer came and we were making mud pies on my friend's back porch. And so he just came and he was like, taking photos of us making mud pies, and we offered him a mud pie because you have to be polite to people who are in your friend's house. And you should offer someone a mud pie if you are making them. So he kindly, very kindly turned us down on the mud pie thing. And then we asked him if he wanted us to pose, but he did not want us to pose. None of the mud pies ended up in the Washington Post, unfortunately. But there is a really lovely photo of me and Eleanor on the front page from that moment. And what I later learned is that my dad actually was like working for the law firm that represented Montgomery County Public Schools. And he very nearly lost his job over that. And he'd gone from basically being like, I couldn't care less if my daughter learns French in school, to being like, my daughter absolutely must learn French in school. They tried to kind of be like, you need to stop this right now, we employ you. And he was like, no, that's absolutely not going to happen. And I think that was a really kind of moving experience for me as his daughter, to see, you know, how hard he would advocate for me, and for me to have access to opportunities and stuff like that. And it's been interesting to kind of see how that plays out in different situations now, because every once in a while someone will like write an article about that case, and the Montgomery County Public Schools denying 2 girls entry into their French immersion program. But we won. They did not like that we ended up on the front page of the Washington Post for that reason. So they eventually let us in, and we started French immersion about like 3 months into the school year. So yeah, I hope that kind of gave you a view of how much you can learn from other people, and how you can kind of start to develop friendships through the telling of stories with other people as well. I feel like we become closer as humans when we share parts of our stories with each other. And they don't even have to be necessarily very serious parts of our stories. They can be lighthearted and playful. They can also get very heavy at times. But I think the key is that we can share in very even informal ways. It can be a one-word like response in a chat. And I feel like I got to know all of you a lot better over the course of that. So before we start turning it over to Q&A, I did want to talk a little bit about a project that is going to be coming down the line for us. And this is a project that's not explicitly affiliated with the Fudeko Project, but in a sense is, because I am teaching a class on the subject right now, and I am also affiliated with the Fudeko Project. So Minnie Negoro, so when I got to UConn, someone was like, yeah, you can do research on Japanese Americans in Connecticut. And I was like, how many Japanese Americans are there in Connecticut? Like, what is the history there? It turns out Aaron is from Connecticut. So there's that. But it also turns out, and Jason and I just learned this, and I'm not sure how this wasn't on our radar before, that the ceramics department at UConn was founded by a former Heart Mountain incarceree. So my grandmother's family was at Heart Mountain. My grandmother was quite a bit younger than Minnie Negoro. She was 12 or 13 at the time. But the exciting thing, if you look at the date when it was founded, is that we are about to hit the 60th anniversary of Minnie Negoro founding the UConn ceramics department. So this year, my students are working on creating an exhibit about Minnie Negoro, and it's going to go up at the Benton, which is our art museum. And we're all super excited about that. I have students who are working on labels. I have students who are working on marketing. One is working on the spatial design of the project. One of them is even going to be translating the materials into Spanish, just because we all care about access, and language access is important. So I've been really excited to see how my students have been bringing their passions to this project. And I just wanted to give you a heads up that will be coming down the line. And I would love if any of you know anything about the Heart Mountain ceramics program, because Minnie Negoro did learn ceramics at Heart Mountain. Please pass that along to us. There is actually very little out there about her, and we feel, and I hope you will feel, just even looking at this small sample of her work, that she is a really underappreciated ceramicist. Her work is absolutely beautiful, and And so we're going to get some of her former students to share with us about her legacy, and we're going to show some of her work. We're even going to show some of her family belongings from Heart Mountain. So if you are in the area, we hope you will come out next year. It will be on display for Day of Remembrance 2025, which is also, I believe, the 80th anniversary of when the camps closed. So an especially big year for us. And I will be turning 35, so that's also important. Okay, so one thing that I did want to just give a brief shout out for is, and let me see if I can get back to the first slide because you'll be able to see her handiwork here. And I'm sorry, Zoe, it's probably not the best example of your handiwork, but we do have this brand new logo that I did want to just show off briefly because Zoe, one of our fantastic UConn students, is in the audience and designed this for us. So this is very exciting for me because we're no longer relying on my handiwork to create a logo. We actually have someone who really knows what she's talking about. And it's also exciting because it shows how the project itself is also committed to, the education of future generations, both within and outside of the Japanese American community, and to students getting opportunities to develop their skills in the context of the project. So we're really excited to have students like Zoe working on this project. And look at that amazing Mikan. I don't think he's in the audience today, but we did get the feedback at one point that the Mikan was too round. And I did say, I was very insistent, the next time we design it, it needs to be a little bit squashier. And Zoe took that feedback and really, I think, blew me away with it. So yeah, what I would love to do now is actually offer the opportunity to chat with you all and hear a little bit about any questions that you may have. So yeah, maybe we'll let Jason kind of kick things off with some practice questions.
Yeah, if anyone wants to ask a question, you can, throw a hand up or, come into the chat and say that you'd like to ask something, or you just throw on your mic and interrupt me. I encourage my students to interrupt me because sometimes it just, that's the best. So one thing we could start with is just kind of learning a little bit more about what will happen, when people contribute to Fudeko. So one question we could ask is, who owns the responses that will be collected in the Fudeko project?
Yeah, that's such an important question, and I did plant it for that reason. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that, but I'd also love for Tom S. to talk a little bit about that because he can tell us more about the digital, and Tom L. might also want to jump in on this as well. Basically, the person who creates it owns everything. So our goal is that you feel entirely empowered to take ownership of your story, and that you should feel totally empowered to advocate for your story at every turn. That's why we really break up the options for sharing your story. So we have options for releasing it one prompt at a time. So you can choose which prompts get released and on what levels they get released. So one option is to just share it with other storytellers. One option is to share it anonymously. Another option is to share it with the public. And then you can also change that as you go along after too. So if you get to the end and you're like, I really actually do want to share the whole thing, you can always do that. But the key is that it is always owned by the person who writes it. It does not belong to us, and we cannot give the rights to the stories away, and would never. So yeah, I'd love to hear it from Tom S. a little bit about what that looks like on the computery end of things.
Well, I think probably I should leave that part to Tom Lee, but I will say that I mean one of the things that I've been impressed with is Hannah's attention to these issues. And I just know I haven't been involved in a project where the permissions have been so granular. I think in meaning that there are so many different options, and that where the contributor has control over at a really like fine grain level over what gets shared and how and with whom. So I think there's been an awful lot of attention to that, and I know Tom. I'll let Tom talk about the attention that's been put in on the back end. But I know that's been really important as we've planned this out. So Tom, do you have you give a little sense of what that all looks like on the back end?
Yeah, would now be a good time for me to actually like walk through what the form
Oh
looks
my
like?
gosh, I totally forgot that part. Yeah.
Okay. All right, yeah, I can do that. So I don't know if anyone here is already registered with us, but if you are and you were part of the group that started on the 13th, then you would have got an email that looked like this. I'll just take a second to also shout out Zoe, who has been working on a redesign of this email. So if you wish this email was just a little bit, well, if you wish this email was even more beautiful, then you only have to wait a little bit longer because you'll be able to see a revision that Zoe was working on. So yeah, this is the email that you would have got from us with a little message, and then the sort of writing tip for the week, and then the list of prompts that have been chosen for you this week. And you have the option of reading them here and going directly to answer one of these prompts, or you can just see all of them together, which I'll do that just for the sake of demonstration. So you get to this list page and you can choose a prompt here. Also just mention that like if you for some reason never want to see a particular question again, you can do that and it'll mark it as something that you don't want to answer. So that's a neat feature. Actually, let me go back because I think I had yeah, okay, this is fine. So this is what the actual response form looks like. So you can read the title and then the sort of secondary prompt questions, which help sort of get more specific. And then there's the area for your response. We've added these the sort of rich text editing feature so that like if you want to bold stuff, you can. Yeah, so you can format it however you want there, and then you see the writing tip again. But to get to the thing we were talking about before, anytime you submit a response, you can choose the share settings and the attribution settings for each response. So the default is to just keep it private, but then you can also choose a few different levels of sharing, and we have like a description for each that sort of gives you additional context to what that means. And for attribution, you can either choose to remain anonymous or be credited as the name that you registered with, or credited as a different name if you choose to. So that is pretty much what we have so far. Was there anything else I missed?
No, that looks great. Thank you so much for doing that, Tom. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that if your materials do end up being released, they will eventually be shared with the Densho repository. And that's because we feel like it's very important to have those materials accessible to the Japanese American community for the long term, and to have them with an organization that has a lot of experience preserving digital collections. So that would not include, I believe, the stuff that is private, but anything that is released publicly will eventually go on to Densho.
So I have a question. Hi, I'm Aaron. When you say you and you're referring to someone who has actually experienced the camps, right? Who is still alive. So this project is for those people to tell their stories. Is that correct?
At present, yes, we are hoping
Okay.
to expand it eventually to include descendants. The great thing about the project is that it will also eventually turn into an open access platform that can be used by other projects as well. Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I did. I'm just I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I have an aunt who is still alive, but I don't know how computer savvy she is. So I think somebody will have to sit with her. Unfortunately, I can't do it because she's on the West Coast. I do have a cousin out there who I think I will approach and ask him to, if possible, if he can sit with her to do this.
So that's one option. The other
Mhm.
option is that actually we are going to be sending out prompts via mail to some participants as well.
Great idea.
She can definitely participate via mail if that's an easier option for her. And in the long run, I would really like for us to be able to accept video and audio files as well, so that there's multiple venues. The idea with the investment in accessibility is that by making all of these options available to people, that people will choose the one that works best for them. But we do have an option where you can work with a partner too. So if your cousin feels up for that, I think it's a great way for people to bond with family members actually. And so I'd encourage that. We really want and are encouraging our participants to send their responses to family as they're going along so that they can hear what their family members have to say. And we are also trying to encourage family members to stay very positive in how they respond to and provide feedback that is much more geared at, you know, oh, you didn't mention this one thing that you could also talk about in another response, or I'd love to hear more about this topic that is kind of related to the thing you wrote about, because they will also have the opportunity to write their own prompts too. So that's another way that if someone is just not really feeling the prompts one week, they can either decide to sit out of the prompts that one week, or they can decide to write their own prompt for themselves. I hope your aunt will sign up. We would love to have her. Any other questions? Feel free to just unmute if you do.
I'd like to chime in for just a moment to share that storytelling is, you know, one, culturally valuable and has deep personal meaning for a lot of us. But it is also a proven therapy. There is such a thing as narrative therapy, which is a way that storytelling connects people to the understandings of themselves, and providing the platform for people to share their stories, and is an important dimension of elder care that gets overlooked a lot. And so these kinds of projects, I think, really, you know, help to provide the basis for supporting that in a way that allows people to kind of go at their own speed, and to, you know, find the right kind of family partners or community partners that they want to be plugged into, so that it's not a solo enterprise, but one where Fudeko is a kind of guide and support, and that, you know, telling the story can lead to deeper connections, better health, and stronger communities.
Yeah, that's one thing that we've thought about a lot, because that was one of the recommendations that we got from the Pandemic Journaling Project PI, who is one of our advisory council members. And we do actually have a Japanese American psychologist, Lisa Nakamura, who is also an advisory council member. So I am definitely not trained in psychology and therapy and stuff like that, but I've done a lot of reading on the subject now. And it was really amazing to have Lisa providing feedback on how to frame the topics. One of the things that I learned from reading about narrative therapy is that it's actually supposed to be really good for people who have survived trauma, and that there's narrative therapy approaches that are specifically designed for people who have survived trauma. So while this is not that, and we can't, and it would not be responsible for us to pretend that it is, we are very deeply invested in ensuring that people have access to other resources that do relate to therapy and psychological health kind of stuff. So we have a page of resources that provide both community specific and also broader access to therapists and mental health practitioners. I was amazed while doing research on this that there's actually a database of Asian American therapists out there. So there's actually really good resources that are designed to provide that kind of support for participants. I think because they can get into some very difficult memories with this project, and we are trying to like ease them into it and make sure that they have time to kind of get accustomed to telling their stories before they start getting into some of the harder parts of those stories. We're hopeful that they will feel strong enough and they will feel empowered enough in telling their story that will be a positive experience for them. But we also do want to make sure that they have access to the resources that they need to feel strong as they are doing that. Any other questions? Gordon.
Yes. Hi, Hana. How are you? Good to see you. Hana and I go back a few years when she was in Minnesota surviving what were once frigid winters. We don't have winters in Minnesota anymore, at least not this winter. My question really is partly about the prompts, because the ones that we've seen, the ones that all of you so articulately responded to were, I would call them kind of generic. My question is, as you get further into the prompt development, do the questions become tailored more to the camp experience, to what happened pre-incarceration, post-incarceration? Do the prompts get more specific about the incarceration experience as you go forward?
They do. Yeah. So that's partly why we're heavily only encouraging incarcerees right now. We also will actually accept people who were alive at that time, but did not live through the incarceration. So I think we have one participant right now who was not incarcerated, but was living outside of the exclusion zone. So again, we will accept other participants, but the program is primarily designed for people who are incarcerated. And
Sure.
We did not choose any prompts that were specific for incarcerees because we would not be able to answer them. But a lot of the prompts get at life pre-war, life in the camps, even, what they observed of specific experiences, what it was like, seeing the draft, seeing calls for volunteers in the camp, seeing draft resistance movements, the loyalty questionnaire, even like, did they engage with any LGBTQ incarcerees? Did they meet any mixed race incarcerees? So we're trying to also get an idea of the diversity of Japanese American experiences, even though we recognize that you know, we might not have any LGBTQ participants or mixed race participants. We would love it if we do, but we do want to make sure that to the degree that we can, that story is also recorded. And I think that people are increasingly realizing that, you know, there are LGBTQ experiences in the camps, and some of them have like minorly been recorded, but some of them really haven't. And that people who were mixed race had very different experiences sometimes than other individuals. So we want to understand that these are individual stories, that there are 125,000 stories, and we need to record as many of them as possible to really understand the nuances of each individual's experience.
One other thing I wanted to just acknowledge is that the value of this kind of project is obviously intergenerational. And I think it's so powerful from that standpoint. You've all been talking about narrative as therapeutic and about addressing trauma and mitigating trauma. But I think the intergenerational learning about this continues to be a fundamental part of what you're doing in any narratives, historical narrative storytelling project, because it really points to not just the history as a frozen past, but a history of the present, and how it is that these things feed into current issues. And all you have to do is look around what's going on right now, and you can see all sorts of relevant sorts of connections that are being made. And I just want to applaud you all for doing what I think is an exceptional project. It's very exciting. So thank you all.
I'm glad. And yeah, we hope that if you know anyone who would be a good candidate for this project, you will consider mentioning it to them. We also recognize that some people won't want to participate in the project, and that's also totally fine. One thing that we did was we posted all of the prompts that we've written for the public, and you can actually just go in and run your own kind of individualized program with your loved one if that's of interest to you too. So just you pick the prompts and design a program and send out your messages to your loved one once a week, and they just write back to you, and we don't even have to be a part of it. So yeah, I'm really excited by the interest in this project. I am excited to see some of the responses as they come in, and we're excited to share them with you eventually too. We're getting close to time. If there is one more question, then we'd be happy to take it, but also go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Gordon, for that question and your comment. You know, I wanted to ask, what do you think success looks like in 5 years? What do you think the Fudeko Project, what do you hope the Fudeko Project looks like in 5 years?
I hope that we have helped a lot of people share their stories with their families. Even if they don't really want them to go public, I really hope that, you know, a grandchild and a child has access to their family stories because of the Fudeko Project. And I hope that we will be able to also get at more specific experiences as well. I mentioned a couple of examples earlier, but I would also really love to have kind of a mini program for each of the camps so that we could get at the specificities of like, this is what happened at Heart Mountain, and we should just ask about Heart Mountain events in this case, or like there at Gila River, one thing that I learned was that there was a place called Sewer Alley or something like that, and that sounded so gross to me. But I would love to ask Gila River incarcerees about Sewer Alley and just hear about, you know, the geographic landmarks that kind of informally popped up at each of the camps. And you know, really start to engage with descendants as well and understand that their lives are important too, and that I would really like also for the babies of the camps to feel like this is part of their story too, because we've had a few participants reaching out and being like, well, I don't really remember anything about it. And part of what I've been trying to tell them is there will be plenty for you to talk about in this, but also we do have questions that are specifically geared at people who won't remember any part of their time in the camps. And that, you know, some of the ways that that trauma pops up is through health problems because of the poor infant care that happened in the camps and the poor maternal nutrition that happened in the camps. Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga has a really excellent part of her oral history where she talks about that. And I don't think there's been enough people really like asking that question. So I would guess that if we hear more from those individuals, we'll have a way better idea of what that looked like long term, like both in terms of health, in terms of trauma and mental health. I think that there are parts of this story that we still really need to tell, and I really am excited that the Fudeko Project is going to be a part of it. Yes, we will make that specific camp stories thing happen at some point. Even just like a month-long program, I think, or like a 2-month-long add-on kind of thing. You know, you finish your first year, you still don't feel totally done. Now you can sign up for the specific camp experience story. Okay, well, we're at 4 o'clock. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you coming out. We will be posting this online. So if anyone wants to check in, if you know of someone else who should listen to it, please check out our website, fudekoproject.org. And you can always reach out to me at my UConn email, and I'm going to just share it here in the chat because I'm probably going to be better at checking that, is in the chat for you all. So yeah, please reach out.